So let's just start with that. What risks come with using soldiers for policing roles in American cities?
Well, look, there's a lot involved in this whole thing. First of all, let me start by saying thank God for the National Guard. There's 430,000 troops. They're our friends, they're our neighbors. They fought with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. They deliver mail. Anytime there's a crisis, they show up in the middle of the night, wildfires, floods. So they're not at fault. We should trust and treasure them. Having said that, the whole thing's a political stunt by the Trump administration. There is no way that the National Guard, which, by the way, their training time is precious to us, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, they're not trained to conduct arrests, to collect evidence, to testify in court. They don't know the neighborhoods. It's all nonsense. They certainly shouldn't be arresting citizens on the street. The optics are anti-American. So that's a second observation. But I think the third one also needs to be made. The Democrats, who have lost their power as a political party, are attacking Trump on the wrong thing. These cities actually are insecure. Our city's insecure. This beautiful, wealthy city of Seattle. With homelessness, drug addiction, mental health unaddressed, the police undermanned. So that's really not the issue to go after this. The wrong part of it is we see Trump ruling by decree. This is quasi-dictatorship already.
General, what do we make of, because right now they are saying that a majority of the National Guard members will carry M17 pistols. What are we to think about them being armed in these cities?
Well, the issue is this is part of the U.S. armed forces. They're uniformed, they carry weapons, they're trained to fight in combat against enemies of America. Of course, they're going to carry weapons, if nothing else, for self-defense. But again, they have almost no value in terms of conducting law enforcement in neighborhoods. They don't know the people. They don't have any training that's relevant. They're certainly not appropriate to have a uniformed member of the active armed forces, once they're federalized, conducting arrests. So it's a political stunt. It's a mess. It's harmful to our global reputation, and we ought to oppose it.
General, I'm glad you brought that part up, and that's exactly what I was really heading towards, is the fact that these National Guard will be deployed into this city. Now, obviously, they're in D.C. right now, and like you just said, you're talking about roughly 2,000 troops not knowing the community, not knowing the people in that community, at the same time while armed. Doesn't that feel like a recipe for disaster?
Possibly. Again, the problem is we shouldn't have military personnel conducting law enforcement operations, period. They shouldn't be doing that in the border. They shouldn't be doing that in Chicago or Baltimore or any of the other cities. They do have a security problem. Chicago does. A lot of violence on the street in some parts of the city at some times of day. The solution is make sure you've manned adequately. The Chicago police and most of these police officers are grossly undermanned. Nobody wants to be a cop anymore. They're being vilified in public. So they don't have enough police officers. They got inadequate number of prosecutors. They probably had bad policies on crime reduction. But you also got to have other tools. You have to have mental health people. You have to have intervention with adolescents to give them something else to do. None of this is appropriate for the U.S. Armed Forces. So again, it's a political stunt. Very little bad will come out of it except damage to our reputation in the international community and in the United States. We need to push back against this. But the larger issue is Trump is ruling by executive order. Where is the Congress, the judicial system? Fortunately, the media has not backed off it.
You were hearing retired General Barry McCaffrey here on the Gian Ursula Show. I want to point out that former Congressman Adam Kinzinger says that the deployment of Guard troops is blatantly unconstitutional, and I want you to hear what he had to say.
A well-regulated militia was put in the Second Amendment to guard against federal tyranny. Joseph Story was an early Supreme Court member, and he said the same thing, that this is necessary to guard against tyranny. Everybody knows this. The National Guard has been viewed as the militia of a state. The National Guard can be used by a president for things like war. But if a National Guard can be activated against the wishes of the people of the state and the governor to be used against that very state, how in the world is that a militia? It's not. He is in clear violation of the Second Amendment.
What do you make of his comment?
Well, look, there's a larger issue here. Congress passed legislation, I think it was 1973, the Emergency Powers Act. There are 125 different emergency powers which the president can elect to announce and carry out. Some of them have safeguards, meaning that they only last for 30 days and then Congress has to approve them. But they'd have to approve it by an overwhelming veto margin. So the president, if he chooses to, can declare a series of emergencies. Clearly, he can federalize the National Guard at will and does so. Every administration does it routinely, to include D.C. So we're in trouble because I think, again, the fundamental problem is Mr. Trump is acting in a lawless, unconstrained manner. But I think he does have clearly the authority to do almost everything we're seeing unfold right now.
So, General, what do you think Mr. Trump's end game is to this? Because clearly, you have made it very clear that the mindset of the National Guard, of our armed forces, is usually focused on battlefield engagement rather than community policing or de-escalation. If that's the case, and we all know this,
I don't think Mr. Trump has a clue what he's doing. I think this is government by whim, by instinct, by political enemies, and his language is so coarse and fundamentally anti-American. And even when he's going after people in his own party, calling people scum and excoriating people from the Oval Office. I don't think he knows what he's doing. He's just thrashing around. And so far, Congress has been incapable of pushing back and demanding their own authority. I've taught American government for years. Article 1 of the Constitution deals with Congress. They're not three co-equal branches of government. Congress has the power of the purse, the power to approve people in public office, the power to declare war. That's where the power of the U.S. government is centered, and they've given up on it. Judicial systems all over the map, but I think so far they've been our one safeguard against what's starting to look like quasi-dictatorship. The guy has a whim, signs an executive order, and intimidates law firms, universities, businesses, demanding ownership of businesses to the federal government. Where did all this come from? This sounds like some third world, dictatorship.
General McCaffrey, you mentioned that he's not getting much pushback from Congress. This is a Congress that is ruled right now by the Republican Party. They've got both the House and the Senate, and there is a very definite fear among the Republicans to speak out against what President Trump is doing right now. So you mentioned that it's the courts that are fighting back, and it seems to me that the states themselves are also, or the certain cities, including Seattle, and you've heard, since you live in this area, you've heard that both the governor and the mayor of Seattle have said they would fight anything, any threat of them being thrown in jail because we are a sanctuary state or a sanctuary city. Your thoughts on what should happen? What role should the federal government be playing? Because you mentioned Seattle has its problems.
Well, no question. And by the way, we've got some pretty good leadership. I'm not here to endorse political candidates, but, Mayor Harrell's first rate and the governor's first rate and the attorney general's first rate. These are sensible, educated, experienced people. So, and they've got their work out for them. You know, countering crime is not just arresting people. And it normally takes years to turn social dilemmas around. But we're faced with a president who is ignorant or unobedient to the law. Basically, this country isn't ruled by executive order. And that's what he's doing. So I'd be unsurprised if we don't see a political confrontation in many of these cities, Chicago, Baltimore, Wes Moore, somebody I've known for 20 years, Rhodes Scholar, combat veteran, 82nd Airborne Division infantry officer. These governors and mayors and county executives have got to push back against this. They're another piece of it. A conservative, in theory, understood a government of limited authority. If it's not specified in the Constitution as a federal right, then it belongs in state government. And Trump is ignoring all that.
You're listening to the voice of General Barry McCaffrey here on the G and Ursula Show. And General, you mentioned it before about right now the authoritarian ways that is happening with Mr. Trump. So my question is if the safeguards, which is usually Congress, and for some reason Congress is very scared and nervous of Trump, and they do whatever that he says, if there's no safeguards and we're just 200 days into his presidency, where possibly and potentially could this go in the next 2 to 3 years?
Look, it seems to me that if Trump is not constrained by the public will, he will continue developing into a total dictatorship. So the remedy is that voters in all the states need to select candidates of character, either party, and put them into office. You got to vote in the primaries. You got to get them in the general election. You have to elect people in the center. AOC, one of the most talented, remarkable young politicians in the country, if she ended up as the candidate for the presidency in the next election, these gangsters will be back in office again. So the country has to say, we're going to get, and Americans all over, I deal with people day in and day out all over the country. I almost never see anybody of the degree of foulness of the people in our government. I don't see people in business. If you go down and talk to our mayor, he won't act like a thug. So we need to step up as voters. I am bombarded by people saying, when's the armed forces going to push back and say this is unconstitutional? The armed forces are apolitical. They're not involved in this. You, Mr. and Miss Citizen, have got to get out there and get involved in the political landscape and get people of character into office. We got a lot of them. We Adam Smith in our state, Senator Patty Murray. These are people of character. That's what we need to see in the Congress.
General McCaffrey, the governor of our state signed this law that prevents National Guard troops from other states from coming here to Washington without the explicit permission of the governor. Is it possible that he could stop Guard troops from entering our state if that is in fact what the president decides?
No. At the end of the day, again, the president has legislative authority to announce emergencies. People may say that's a false emergency. Like we need National Guard not to control riots, but to do neighborhood policing. But I think the president, acting unilaterally and unconstrained by the Congress in particular, has a whole range of powers. What are we going to be in a civil war? Have the Washington Guard shooting it out with the Texas Guard? But this is where Trump is taking us. So again, we got to get out and understand the midterm elections. I'm not speaking up for the Democratic Party, but for getting people of character in political office of either party.
General Barry McCaffrey, we appreciate your time. Thank you.